Welcome to Season 3 of You Belong Here, a podcast dedicated to helping you connect with the people, supports, and resources in Strathcona County. Hi, I'm your host, Doneka, and today we are excited to have Cortney from A Safe Place to chat with us about the work and impact of a safe place in our community and to better educate our listeners about family violence. So, welcome, Cortney.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, and it's lovely to see you today. I'm wondering to kick us off if you would be so kind to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
Thank you.
So my name is Cortney. I've been with A Safe Place for almost 4 years. So I've worked primarily in intimate partner violence prevention in my career, so for about 20 years. This is my first experience working in a shelter environment, so that has been really interesting. I'm from Nova Scotia. I moved to Alberta to go to school and then just never left.
Well, and to our credit, you are here in our community, and we are benefiting from your presence and the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And so thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the important work that you do.
Thank you very much.
So today we're talking about a subject that I just want to extend to our listeners, that we are in this space with you. And we are extending compassion, empathy, kindness for anyone that might be experiencing domestic violence, family violence. And we just want people to know that they're not alone. And we hope today that we will unpack some of the myths, some of the challenges, some of the highlights, because, Cortney, I'm sure working in this area that you get to know people, you get to know their stories, and there is hope. And so I also want to extend to our listeners that message of hope.
Absolutely.
I can attest for myself and the work that we do collectively in our community, that hope is a thread that is weaved through all the work that we do. It helps keep us in this work.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for agreeing with that. It is important.
It absolutely is.
And we want people to know that there is a way forward. So, Cortney, can you tell us a little bit about A Safe Place?
Yes, I'd love to. So we actually opened our doors here in Strathcona County in 1984. So 40 years. We've served in our shelter program over 25,000 women and children in that 40 years, which is I think a pretty cool history. We are primarily an emergency shelter. So our work is very much around supporting families to flee a situation that's unsafe and to come into shelter. Our shelter program does not have a length of stay. So there's lots of emergency shelters that operate that way. We don't. We very much follow the lead of the family. And again, that's also just connected to the reality of supporting people to move on from shelter. We have a very robust outreach program where we support families who might not need shelter but still need support around navigating not even just family violence, but maybe family court, or there might be some charges against a partner, supporting with all of those things. We also support through professional referrals too. There's lots of different ways that families can engage, but primarily families call us directly when they need support. And then we also offer education, training opportunities to professionals, to community groups, really anyone who's interested in learning more about family violence and how they can support our community to be safe and healthy.
So, shall we dive into it?
Let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. Okay. So in helping our listeners kind of ground the conversation in the subject matter, would you be kind to give us a definition or just your awareness and knowledge about what actually is family violence? What is domestic violence? What does it look like? What does it mean?
Absolutely. So the tricky thing about defining it is that it can really look like anything. What we try to focus on in shelter and the work we do in community is less about how it's presenting and more about what the risks are for certain families and how we can support in that way. So domestic violence, family violence can again look like anything, but the major distinguishing factors are that it's a pattern of power and control by one person over another or by a group of people, and that this is in an intimate setting in some way. So in our work, it tends to be intimate partners, so husband and wife, long-term partnerships. When we talk about family violence, we are usually referring to intimate partner violence that also has children in the home. So I think the one I'll start with would be physical violence. I think that's often what people think about when they think about what family violence looks like. So physical violence is really any threat to someone's person. So it could be a pinch, it could be a slap or a punch. It could also be a punch to a wall beside someone's head. So physical violence is absolutely a type of violence. It is important to note that even if physical violence isn't included in someone's experience, that doesn't mean their risk is not high. So I think that's just important to note. There's also sexual violence within intimate partner relationships, which can look lots of different ways too, but is around the lack of consent and maybe sometimes sharing people's information about their sexual history with other people without their consent. Emotional violence is one that we see a lot, and again, can look lots of different ways, but is usually around either questioning someone's reality. That didn't happen. That's not what you said. But it could also be name calling or, calling someone out for previous behavior without their consent, trying to, shame them in public, those sorts of things. Financial abuse, we see more and more and more. And that's really can be different things as well, but could be forcing the person to work, not allowing them to work, being in control of the finances, it could be something like gambling away the paycheck, things like that. And then another one that we're often really worried about and see lots is spiritual or cultural abuse. And that is using someone's belief system against them. So we have lots of newcomers to Canada that we work with, and they really talk about experiencing, one, not having an understanding about sort of what the legal rights they have are here around experiencing violence, but also, I'll tell your family back home if you try to leave, things like that. Or that's not what it says in, whatever their scripture is based on their religious beliefs. So yeah, those are a couple of examples. When I started doing this work, we used to talk about, kids aren't necessarily exposed, even if there is violence between the parents. What we now know is that that's not the case. And if there are children connected to the parents, they might not even be in the home. They are impacted and they are exposed to that violence. So we tend to use that term family violence when there are children involved. Yeah, so the pattern is really the big piece, because there can be violence in relationships, but it's that pattern of power and control that really distinguishes violence from abuse or that ongoing power and control dynamic. And what's also really interesting is we know now, I think, again, probably even 10 or 15 years ago, we used to talk about people who were perpetrating violence being looking for power and control, like that's what they were seeking. And what we now know is that is absolutely sometimes true, but for the most part, people that are perpetrating violence as a part of that power and control inside abusive relationships often more so have a sense of entitlement to power and control in their relationships, which is really interesting to think about. So, and actually a lot harder to navigate. So that's how I would define it.
Thank you. It's interesting as I was listening to you provide that description from your experience and just some of the ongoing learnings in this field and the new things that are being discovered and recognized, and then just the role of children being in the home and just how that awareness has come forward now of the impact on children. And I'm just wondering, Cortney, in your experience in shelter, what does that look like? So how does that play out for example, say a young mom coming in with a child? What happens? How do they, how do they fit within a shelter structure? What happens to the child and what kind of supports are offered to children?
Yeah. So we talk about how mums and kids come into shelter quite differently, and then the roles sort of switch a little bit. So when a family comes to shelter, so normally they have themselves made a call to us about requiring some additional safety. We have a wonderful team of registered social workers. We have some staff that have criminology backgrounds, psychology backgrounds who assess risk. And when we bring a family in, kids are often really pumped because there's lots of other kids around, there's toys, there's people making food for them, and mums are really worried about what they're walking into. They're relieved that they are no longer in a dangerous situation, but they're not sure what to expect. So kids are usually really open and excited, and mums are quite reserved. And then about 72 hours in, after mom has a chance to rest and get to know us a little bit, and the kids also get to know us a little bit, it switches. Kids are like, wait a minute, I think I'd like to go home. I don't necessarily want to be here. There's lots of noise. We also have, at any given time, 11 families in our space, and communal living is not easy for moms or kids. And so as moms sort of start to settle and feel a bit more comfortable and like they can open up and, they're comfortable with the decision they've made, kids start to go, wait a minute, I didn't have a say in this. And so often, even kids who are happy to be there, there's lots of behaviors and emotional dysregulation that we see in kids, which we're really grateful to see because that usually means they feel safe enough to show us. But yeah, there's lots of work that our team does. We're really lucky. As a larger domestic violence shelter in Alberta, we're very lucky. We have a pretty large child and youth support team. So we have 4 full-time staff, and that's all they do is support not just the children, but the mums as well around parenting. One of the really interesting things that happens after fleeing violence is mums are often getting the first opportunity, sometimes in their whole history as mums, to decide how they would like to parent. The other piece around that is parenting after violence also means that our kids can trigger us. There can be behaviors that remind us of the perpetrator. It's not as simple as just leaving. We also know that families just after leaving are just at the beginning of navigating family court, parenting orders, all of those things. And so the stress around parenting after fleeing can be really a lot for everyone. Kids don't have a say in coming into shelter. Mums usually do. I mean, sometimes we do, have the police come to the door with a family, and mums have been told that they need to provide safety. And so there are it's not as simple as saying mums are choosing, but for the most part, mums are saying, I need to leave where I am, and they're choosing to come in. Kids don't get to say that. So yeah, I think it's for the kids in shelter, we really try to focus on giving them as normal an experience as possible. We want them to play. We want them to eat lots of food and, hang out and build healthy relationships with the other adults in the building and the other families. We also really focus on grief and loss with kids. Again, even if the person that the family is fleeing has perpetrated lots of harm, it's very common for kids to feel very connected to that parent and want to be with that parent or want to make sure that parent's okay. So that can be, there's lots of grief and loss to navigate around that, make sure kids feel heard, and that they know that those feelings are all really okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. It just reminds me of how complex a situation can be for a family to go through something that they are needing to reach out for supports. And then I also hear you say, that first step and then that initial entry into something like a shelter can bring up various emotions and challenges, both for the parent and the child.
Absolutely.
And also how your trained staff are aware of those complexities and help both the mom and the child work through things as they're going through it.
Absolutely.
And just even in the name, a safe place, it really it brings that image of, okay, I can breathe, I can take a breath. And so just in terms of, so you're talking about an example from a shelter space. I'm also thinking kind of now outside of that and thinking that, and we know that family violence is a major public health issue.
Absolutely.
And for the people listening, and maybe for people that have loved ones that might be experiencing this with a loved one, a neighbor, a family member, someone at work, and shelter is not necessarily something that they're looking for. What are some of the things that people recognize, or some of the things that people can do if they are noticing something in their own family situation or for someone else? Can they reach out? Who can they talk to? Where do they go?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So we know that less than 10% of people who are navigating abuse in the home will ever reach out to a shelter. So that's a really worrisome number in terms of just the concern around who's experiencing it and who's going to reach out. We have a 24/7 helpline, and that number is in place to absolutely provide information about how to come into shelter. So that helpline number, which is 24/7, 365 days a year, is 780-464-7233. But we also want everyone to know that that number is also in place if you have a question, if you think you might be experiencing violence but you're not sure, if you're worried about a friend, a family member, a colleague, a kiddo that your kiddo goes to school with, any of those pieces, that we are really in place to help on the whole continuum of anyone experiencing violence or worried about it. For those people who don't like to make a phone call, they can go to our website, and there is an email that they can use to reach out to us. It's the same people who answer our helpline, and that is just helpline@asafeplace.ca. So that's another way to reach us. We have a very robust outreach program here in Strathcona County. So we support families who are experiencing family violence, but who are not interested in coming into shelter. They might also not be interested in leaving a relationship. One of the things we know about intimate partner violence is that preparing to leave, leaving, and actually up to 18 months after someone has left a relationship, the risk remains very, very high. And so we want to honor that for people. If they aren't ready or not wanting to come in, that is not a barrier to accessing services by any stretch. We can meet in the community. We can invite outreach clients to come to the shelter if they're comfortable to meet with outreach workers. We can meet at FCS and do that work. There's lots of different ways for us to engage with families. And one of the strategies that we talk about around supporting people who are experiencing violence, it's really simple. So it's just the 3 R's. So it's, how do you recognize potential violence? And the thing is when you see a worry, we are really good at humans at making up the story about what's going on for that family. And that's why we tend to focus on risk more than on what we're seeing and what we think it might be. So things that if you're in a family or you have a friend or a neighbor that you're worried about, you're absolutely looking for a change, like something that's shifted. And from there, it's a little bit about putting an investigator hat on and say, are there things going on for this family that might increase risk? A recent job loss, additional financial stresses, a stepchild in the home is one of the things that actually increases risk. Drug and alcohol concerns or abuse of one of the people in the family. So things like that. And then from there, so that's recognizing the warning signs, the risk factors. From there, it's about responding. And this is really about starting with your heart. You don't need to be a social worker to do this work. This is about saying, I'm worried about you. This is what I've noticed. Sometimes really just being direct and saying, are you experiencing abuse at home? And if you are, I'm here to help get you resourced. This isn't about you as the friend or family member fixing the problem. This is about you having a caring, supportive conversation with the person you're worried about. They might shut the door in your face, but what's happened in that moment is you have indicated that you care and that you see them. And that can have an impact even if you don't know that it does. So there's recognize, warning signs, risk factors. There's response. So just start with heart. Be honest about what you're seeing and ask if they need support, and then refer is the third R. So having some knowledge about what the resources are in the community. So absolutely, our helpline, FCS, FRN. There's lots of really amazing resources here in Sherwood Park, and supporting them with that referral if they'd like some support. So maybe going with them or helping them make that call in a safe way. And that's really as simple as it is. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Really appreciate the simplicity of 3 R's.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that, people can remember, and action. And it really stood out to me, the heart. And, so as a community that cares about the safety of our residents, I'm also hearing that you don't do this work alone. So you do this work in collaboration with Family Community Services, with other community partners. And working at Family and Community Services, I know that we do have one of your outreach workers who is co-located with us at our office, so that if anyone is coming into our office and looking for resources and supports, we can introduce that person to the outreach worker, and then they can establish some connection, and then start that process of initiating some further conversation if that's what the person wishes to do.
Beautiful.
So that's really lovely that as a safe place has a shelter space, has the 24/7 call line that anyone can call. You've also got you've got your arms reached out into the community, and you're recognizing that it does take a community effort and a collaborative effort to support people in our community with just expanding that heart space to as many people as we can.
One of the things we know about risk in terms of abuse in the homes is that isolation increases risk. So we know that if isolation increases risk, the opposite is true. Connection, collaboration among services, supporting families to not have to tell their story 13 or 14 times, they can tell it once and get access to all of those resources. That is increasing safety. Yeah, it's just the right way to do the work.
I love that, the right way to do the work, because in this space where we're dealing with people's livelihoods and people's sensitive parts of their intimate intimate relationships, it can be a space where sometimes we want to be respectful.
Absolutely.
So having some way to navigate that can be really, really important. So really appreciate that. And thinking of all of some additional things that a safe place does in our community, are there any other things? I know there's a ton, Cortney, and I know you work with other professionals. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you expand that network to professionals so that we can continue to learn and gain more awareness, so that then ultimately we can give that back to our community?
Yeah. One of the things we've been really excited about in the last few years is offering the risk assessment tool training that we use in shelter, which is called the danger assessment, is offering it to other professionals that we work alongside. It, one, increases some shared language about the work, but we also know that anyone working with families is working with families experiencing violence. So whether that's your role specifically or not, that is something you will navigate. So we want to make sure everyone has the language and the tools that they need. I think it's also really helped us to develop our expertise and our known expertise in the community so that we get more referrals, right? That people feel comfortable sharing our helpline with people that they're talking to. We also know that families experiencing violence are usually not just experiencing violence. It could be addiction, mental health, chronic poverty, intergenerational trauma. There's all of these other things. Abuse does not happen in this isolated way. So we need other professionals because we are really good at assessing risk and safety planning. Those wraparound supports are absolutely necessary.
Yeah, that indeed. And just even thinking about the complexities of life just on a whole, in terms of, as you say, housing and just the cost of living these days.
Absolutely.
So it's nice to know that there is a place where someone can access resources and supports. And
Absolutely.
And just to kind of wrap up a little bit of the conversation, I just want to thank you for sharing the wraparound support model, the care team approach, the respect for the family, putting the family at the center and acknowledging and appreciating that the choice is up to the individual and the family. And then we're there when the person is ready to engage with accessing supports and resources.
Absolutely.
And so at Family and Community Services, I know we're very grateful for our teams that work with a safe place. Are there any further examples that you'd like to share before we close out of any partnership that is currently in practice with either of those teams, other than what we've chatted about?
Yeah, well, I was thinking of a story, actually. So we had a mom who came to us directly through a labor and delivery team in the city, and which is a common referral pathway for us. And she came in with her new baby, was quite unsafe. She'd actually lost custody of an older child of hers, which was connected to the violence that had sort of been chronic in her life for a number of years. Came in, she stayed with us for quite some time, but was connected to the FRN and FCS, really, again, that wraparound support. And she has since moved on from our shelter. She would have loved to stay, which is very sweet and adorable, and we loved hearing that. But she moved on to a second stage program, and a lot of the groundwork that was done in shelter with those collaborations here locally supported her to do the work, to reconnect to children's services. And she's had her son in her care, back in her care for over a year now, and she's doing really, really great. So again, I think it's important just to highlight that family violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, all of these terms, they don't just impact someone's physical safety or even their emotional safety. They also impact their ability to look after their kids, their ability to work, their ability to stay connected to their family and friends. This is comprehensive violence that happens in all sorts of areas of their lives. And there's so much guilt and shame for moms who are accessing supports around struggling with parenting or struggling to, have a job. And for me, the message that's really important to go out is that we see and honor everyone who is living and surviving and doing their best. And we believe that if they choose to do something different, they can do that. And we want to support them to do that.
So, Cortney, I think that's a lovely place to wrap up our conversation, and I really appreciate the words that you just used in describing that message to our listeners. And that message is so very, very crucial when someone is experiencing something that is so complex and really touches on so many different aspects of their life experience. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for busting some myths for us today. Thank you for drawing us into what we can do for each other as a community, how important it is to collaborate, to work together, how important it is to continue to learn so that we can be effective and supportive of people when they do reach out. And we just want listeners to know that this conversation doesn't have to stop here. And thank you for today. And we want people to know that they can visit us at strathcona.ca /YouBelongHere to find links to resources for family violence and how to access shelter space, how to access other resources in the community like our Solutions Navigation Program, our counseling, our family resource network. This community has many supports. And so reaching out is the first step, and we honor that. We honor that courage.
Absolutely.
So we also encourage our listeners to sign up for our monthly e-newsletter to get alerts about new podcast episodes, local resources, workshops, and events in your inbox. So that brings this podcast to a close. Thank you to our listeners for joining us today. Thank you, Cortney, for this lively discussion, and thank you for all the work that you do. Take good care. Take care, everyone.